So yeah, well, thank you for the introduction, Sam, and kind of spelled it all out. So I don't know how that I have much more to say. But I kind of, if you've got questions as we go, we can do questions at the end. But in the middle, I don't mind it if you've got specific questions about something or want a little more technical explanation of something. But yeah, I primarily do ceramic work, and I started out my career in the sandbox and working with Legos, and I pretty much just do the same thing now. And it's been pretty wonderful to be able to kind of pursue this throughout my lifetime, and working for a number of different artists and learning from them, and then being back in this area. Like I said, primarily clay. I do a little bit of stainless steel with the clay now, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later on. But that feel of clay and being around clay and the process and the timing, the rhythm of it, and the patience it takes are all things that really kind of interest me and fit with my personality. And they're things that I've had to learn. The patience. When I was working for June, we worked on projects. Some of them took 2 years, start and finish. So it's very, very slow process and lots of waiting and not rushing. You don't force clay to do something it doesn't want to do. It'll turn around and bite you really quickly. So I do some vessels, throne vessels, and hand built vessels, some figurative work, and quite a bit of public work. So I'm going to be showing those towards the end. But love clay and all the different things it does in its history as a society that we have with clay as storage for food and food preparation. This is a throne vessel. From a while ago, you can tell a picture of me. But I've built an oversized wheel, potter's wheel, that moves very, very slowly, but it can turn a lot of weight, and it's just a slow process of adding clay to it and letting it stiffen up. But the throne vessels that are much more about the vessel and sort of that history, like I said, that we have with the vessel.
Here, let me sure it's active for you. Now try it.
There it goes. This is a building. My wife Diane is here with me this evening. She's an attorney in Wichita and also an author. But we have fixed up a house in North Newton, the old Coppice farmhouse, if you know where that is. And this is, if you grew up around here, this is the old Sanders feed mill. And I have a memory of moving here in 1966 and going to Sanders feed mill to pick out our Christmas tree. So I went into this building in 1966 when I was 4 years old and rode up. The old freight elevator was open. It didn't have any, it just had a little kind of rail on the side. And I remember as a 4-year-old riding that thing up, and the floor sort of came up and you could smell the fresh cut Christmas trees up there. And I have a very distinct memory of that. So it was kind of cool that I wound up with this building in about 1985, got the building and lived there and worked there as a studio, and still it's my studio to this day. So it's been very interesting to fit into a space that exists already. So if I was to just build a studio right from the ground up, it would be different than this. But having the space and having to fit into it, having to figure out how to use it, has been interesting. I've had to cut some doorways a little bit larger, but how you get things out of the kiln into the kiln, onto the pickup, and into a gallery. So there are some sort of size space limitations as far as that is concerned. So yeah, it's been an interesting structure to sort of be a part of. So clay is something that vitrified clay is an amazingly tough material. So there's clay sewer pipe that the Romans made that is in the ground that's been used every day for the past 2,000 years and it's still being used. So it's like we don't think in that way really as a culture anymore. the longevity of what we make or what we have around us. So for about 20 years, there was a ceramic artist, Paul Soldner was his name, and he designed a number of different pieces of ceramic equipment. I was a friend of his, and he at one point decided he was not wanting to manufacture the equipment anymore, and I bought the company from him in 2001, and manufactured them here in Kansas for 20 years and shipped them all over the place. So it's been an interesting thing to be a part of. I've shipped them to Saudi Arabia and Nicaragua and Mongolia and into Russia and South America and Korea. And so these machines that I made here went all over the place. And part of that was it got involved with a group that is called Potters for Peace. And they go in and set up cottage industries. So using local materials, local labor, they make these porous water filters. So you can take water, just any water out of the creek, and pour it into these ceramic water filters and let it percolate through them, and it filters out most everything. And then they impregnate that that porous clay with a silver solution. And so if a bacteria does get through there, it only lives one generation. It's sterilized by coming in contact with that silver. So even if you would ingest it, it would live one life cycle and die. So it won't affect you. So it's an interesting program, and we supplied a couple of mixers for some of those industries they were setting up. I did a 5-year apprenticeship with Jun Kaneko. We worked in Japan and Holland. His main studio is in Omaha, and he also has studio in Japan, and then worked on this project, which was in the East Bay area of San Francisco. So we made these large dumplings, dungos he calls them, sort of big egg-shaped forms. So these were about 12 feet tall, 6,000 pounds of clay in each of those. So very long, slow process. And I had a little tent that I slept in next to the kiln and would get up and check the kiln every hour for 6 weeks. And it was an immersive, intense, really incredible experience working for him. But really, learning the patience, learning the lifestyle of what it takes to produce things that size and that speed. And until fairly recently, I would go around and set up shows of Jun's also. So it was an interesting extra thing. I was doing the mixers, I was making my own work, and I was doing a lot of installations for Jun, different parts of the country. So I've sold the mixer business, and I'm not doing any more installations. I'm in the studio full time, which has actually been very nice thing for me to be able to be full time in the studio. So here's the oversized wheel that I built. You can see it's got a center pivot on it, and then it's got bearings all the way around the outside. And I had a big donut of thick stainless steel cut with a water jet. The water jet cutter doesn't develop any heat; it just cuts the steel, and so there's no warping or anything. So I wound up with a nice smooth surface, and so it doesn't wobble at all. A regular potter's wheel, once you get a really large piece of clay on there. And I built some with 1.5 inch stainless steel center shaft, and they're still flexing that. So this one doesn't have any of that movement in it, but you can see. So I sometimes on a little bit smaller piece, I can start with a lump of clay and throw basically a big bowl, and then start adding clay, working my way up. This one, I just started building the bottom of the piece, wedging the clay, stacking it on there, and then getting it turning and doing the throwing process. So each day or every other day, I would be adding 8 or 10 inches of clay, connecting it, and then doing the throwing process, and then covering the rim, letting it stiffen up over those 2 days, going back and reworking the joint, and then adding more clay. So I can't add all the clay at once; it'll just fall down. So it's a process of keeping the top soft enough to add to, but letting the bottom get firm enough to support the weight. So it's a real kind of delicate balance there. So I just work my way up. There's a little foot pedal like a sewing machine that controls the speed. So I just stack up whatever I can find and stand on that. And then work my way up. And then firing is the next part of the process. So the pieces dry for several months to a year, kind of depending on how fast I'm needing to go. But sort of keep them covered so they can even out, uncover them during the day so some moisture can leave, and cover them up again. So it's that process of sort of letting the moisture come to the outside, evaporate, and then kind of wick some more moisture out of it. Firing is the next part of that process. So I built a number of kilns for myself and for other people. For June, we built some very large kilns, and some we had an opportunity to fire old beehive kilns. So that some of them were pretty close to the size of this room, and another 8 feet high, big domed kilns. But it was amazing firing a kiln that size. What you're watching for and listening for and smelling and where the back pressure is and all those things are the same as a smaller kiln. So it was an amazing experience to be around kilns that size. This is one that I designed and built to kind of fit pieces that were sort of my scale, bigger pieces and vessels that were, kind of my size. And so I designed it and spent about a year collecting parts and earning money so I could buy everything for it, built it. And the first firing, I had about a 600-degree temperature difference from top to bottom. So that's the difference between, clay being still powder and being melted into a glass. So, so I spent about 6 months thinking about it and redesigning it, adding things and experimenting and doing other firings. And it took about 6 months. I added more burners halfway up. And, you've seen water. So I look around at nature and industry and, all the solutions that other people and nature have come up with for things. But you can see, you've seen sinks that sort of have a sheet of water or, something like that coming out of it. And I thought, well, if you can shape a water coming out of something, why can't you shape flame? There's some sort of physical characteristics that are different between water and flame, but there are some similarities too. So I was able to as the flame comes through the wall, it goes in a circle, and then as it goes through it sort of is stretched out into a flame and then washes along the inside of the kiln and radiates heat in. So I don't get a hot spot right where that comes into the kiln. And I added a blower and a spark igniter, and I had to balance all 4 burners separately. I had little orifices in each burner. So over 6 months of experimenting, I was able to get it evened out. And I've got firings that'll come out within 7/10 of 1 degree from top to bottom now. So it was a long process, but an interesting one to figure all that out. And I had it computerized. So I had a little computer that I could tell how many degrees per hour to raise the temperature, because they're very long, slow firings. So, a couple degrees an hour. And I used that for a long time. It quit working about a year ago. And I'm pretty cheap. So I wasn't wanting to have to buy a new computer. So I was just like, what, I need to fire. So I'm going to fire manually. And I've really enjoyed that reconnecting with the process. So I'll probably never use a computer on the kiln again. I just quit using it. And so they are long firings. So I've gotten to relearn the kiln and sort of how it goes. I'm able to make an adjustment at night before I go home, and then pick it up in the morning, and I'll do some climbing overnight. And that's worked pretty well. I have set up a little camera so I can look. I can't control anything, but I can be at home and I can look at the kiln and see if the whole room's on fire or something. But but yeah, I can look at the pyrometer and know what temperature it is, and so yeah, it's been an interesting thing to be back kind of in connection with the kiln in a different, the old fashioned way.
So is a long firing days, weeks, how long?
10 to 14 days.
Right.
So very, very slowly up and slowly back down again.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's so some of the, and I'll go even longer than that. Kind of depends on how large and how thick the pieces are. And I like to build them pretty thick because especially a lot of public art projects are, they need to be tough. People are climbing on them or throwing things at them or,
Acting like
who knows what. Yeah. Yeah. But you try and prepare for that. So anyhow, there was a piece in the kiln open. This is a glazed sample wall I have. I try and explain to people this isn't like going to Sherwin-Williams and picking out a paint color because it's, it depends on the firing and how things overlap and how thick they are and the moon and, I don't know what all, but it's different every time. But this is just a way for me to kind of start heading in a direction. And I do a lot of firing and refiring, put more glaze on and usually stuff keeps getting better until it cracks and then I have to haul it to the landfill. But multiple firings somehow or other, things are visually sort of a little deeper in the surface for some reason. Mm-hmm.
Is there a lot of crazing on those big pieces?
Not particularly. It sort of depends on the fit of the glaze and the clay. So it really on a really large piece, it's not necessarily more than on a small piece because of the scale. So
you still stay away from clears then, I assume?
Well, you can, it just depends on what you want. And the crazing, is a lot of times not that big a deal. It can, in fact, like in June's pieces, he uses a colored slip and then clear glazes to develop his colors, and it crazes and it's stuck. It's not going to pop off, but the crazing is really something that's kind of beautiful about it. And so and that's something you sort of understand about the material and sort of its beauty, how it, in some of the pieces I'll show in a few minutes, like how it rips and tears and its mass and all those things and sometimes even cracks that you would think were maybe a problem on a pot that you were going to use, but some of those things can be really beautiful too. So again, like the chunky hand-built vessels. So it's about the mass, it's about the scale of them and the weight and how they rip and tear and how the clay responds to impact, all those things, but still a vessel. And some figurative work, also kind of, it's a lot about the material and its beauty, and I kind of nudge it in the direction of being a figure. I use text once in a while. I try and be kind of sparing with that. I feel like it's a little bit of a crutch. It's a little too easy to just stick that meaning in there just by writing on the piece, but I do it once in a while.
Are they solid?
No, most of the walls are 1.5 or 2 inches thick. So yeah, they're not solid. You could do it solid, but it would be a long process. But I want them to appear solid. Right. Yeah. So that, and on this kind of thing, and there's the library and piece in Wichita, you have to sort of follow that, hold your finger there and follow the text, walk around the piece and interact with it that way in order to read all the text and follow it. So I'm wanting that kind of physical interaction.
And like they fit together.
Yeah. The title of this is Insomnia, and it's a pair of figures, and it's sort of about that space between the two figures. But they're about 6 feet tall and about 400 or 500 pounds a piece. So they're heavy, and I've had to learn how to move stuff around. And I built a bed on my pickup that's got a lift on it, lots of places to strap on, and a big overhead lift with I-beams and everything. And I was installing a piece 2 weeks ago, actually, and the construction manager was clearly sent over, and she said, she said, "Have you ever used that thing before?" She was very concerned that I was going to hurt myself or hurt someone else. I had to reassure her that, yeah, I've done this before. I do this all the time. And yeah, I did get them installed without hurting anybody. So that I have fairly large kilns, but there's still a scale limitation with ceramics. So unless you want to just cut the piece arbitrarily because that's what fits in the kiln, which bothers me, unless I can hide the joints fairly well, I try not to have joints. Murals have been a way to kind of transcend that scale limitation, and especially with architectural stuff, you need fairly large scale to compete with buildings and or work with buildings. So the murals have been a way to kind of get past that division and sometimes even use it and while working in a fairly large scale. So this is just going to kind of show you the process. This was a piece for the business school at KU, and the piece is titled Opening Move. So kind of taking off on the idea of the Kansas landscape being a grid, chessboard, business kind of being a strategery, as our ex-president would say, and all those types of things. So trying to tie it together on the public projects, I try and look at the structure, the architecture, what its use is, who's going to be using it, the population that's around there, and so trying to tie it into some of those different things. So I laid it out on the floor, drew the grid, and everything shrinks about 11% in the kiln. So you've got to always work larger and then let it shrink down to fit spaces. So the thicker tiles have cogs and things that we sort of think of from business and keyboards and stuff pressed into it. So that ability of clay to record, make those records. Some of the earliest records of human beings are footprints in clay that were fossilized. So I love that about the material also. You can see there's some binary code in this, and so there's actually binary code in there that spells out Jayhawks.
Right.
So yeah, you'd never see it or figure it out, but it's just sort of a little level of interest there. So the thinner tiles were glazed kind of a Kansas sky blue, and then prairie grass sort of colors on the thicker tiles with the texture. So I welded up a steel frame that I attached to the wall first, put plywood on there, put adhesive and screws to hold the tiles in place, and then grouted the tiles. So they won't be taking it off the wall anytime soon.
Do you have a favorite clay body that you're using with all of this, or is there separate ones for each?
I use, it's a stoneware clay body, and
I 6 or
10. Yeah, it's firing to cone 10. So I use kind of just one clay body so I don't have to try and keep it separate in the studio. I do kind of add different amounts of grog to it. So pretty coarse grog in some of it. I'm kind of at this point just using the one clay body with the one amount of grog. And that way I can just recycle and reuse everything if it doesn't work out.
Did you formulate that? Or is that something?
Yeah, it's kind of a basic stoneware. Yeah, and it's sort of, half a bag of this and a whole bag of that, and then some experimenting with the amount of body flux, and I put kyanite in it.
So is it clay body like the supply of clay that you're drawing from when you're adding to a work, or?
Right, a clay body is, so the clay is, if you've dug in your backyard, there's clay. This is why questions are good as we go along. The whole planet's made out of clay. If you've dug in your garden, there's clay there. The clays that we have around here are mostly secondary clays. So over the millennium, they've been moved by wind and water and had a lot of organic materials and things mixed in them. So they actually melt at a very low temperature. at the temperatures I fired to, the clays around here would melt into a glaze. So the high temperature clays that I use come out of the ground in Ohio, Tennessee, Missouri. That whole area has good high temperature clays. So in a clay body, you're mixing together clays and grog, which is sand basically. So not sand, but and glass making materials. So you get it to, you add body flux to make it melt at a certain temperature. And so what I'm trying to do is get a clay body that I get right up to its melting point, just before its melting point, and that's when it's its strongest. Before that, it's not, that's called vitrification. So before that, if you've had flower pots in the yard that aren't vitrified over the years, they kind of flake apart, break down. So that's because they weren't fired to quite a hot enough temperature. And yeah, so anyhow, just kind of work my way up, and then that's the final piece. So then that's, in public settings, having people touch the pieces and interact with them, that tactile interaction is something that I really love. We did a project, I'll be showing it here in a minute, with Ray at the library, the branch library in Wichita, and there was a Head Start program right there. And as I was installing those things, the kids were coming in and out going classes, and they were just all over these things, touching them. And that was just really, really gratifying. I don't know if there are any business school students that care all about this, but it's right there in the hallway, and they can have that tactile interaction as well as sort of the visual, and maybe spending a little more time with it, or just a passive interaction as they walk by. So that's one of the things I like about public art, is that it is out there where people don't have to seek it out, and they can interact with it or not. And
how many hours would you say you had on that design?
Oh yeah, it's I get that question a lot, and it's not difficult to answer, because I do a number of different things, and like the mixers were that way for me. If you've got a problem, or trying to come up with an idea or something, a lot of times that comes to you when you're doing something else, and it's that letting it ruminate, kind of being in your subconscious and interacting with other things and other thoughts you're having. So yeah, that having a lot of different things to do in your day or in your week is important to me. There's nothing more terrifying, I think, than looking at a blank piece of paper. So, whether that's writing or anything, so nothing comes out of a vacuum. So yeah, it's kind of difficult, because you're always sort of working on ideas and chewing on stuff. And this is a piece that's at Bethel College. So the sort of that threshing stone, and then the edges of the threshing stone just going on out and intersecting with others, and that, like we all do after we leave school, go out and interact and change the rest of the world. And so there is some text involved in this one, and there are textures from around campus, and then there was some in here that were these. Somebody's like, "Oh, those are lawn staples, that you hold down irrigation tubes with." I said, "No, it's the edge of a book. That has a little more to do with that staples do." But that textures, you don't always know what they are, but they can be interesting textures. So this is up in Salina at the Salina Art Center, and sort of the flow of water and wind. And you can see it's washed out a little bit, but the terracotta tiles are colorful. In Salina, there's sort of a Spanish architecture, and so it picked up on some of those colors, and the divisions in the colored tiles came from some of the ceramic tiles that were around town, and then again sort of the prairie colors. have native plants and grasses pressed into them. And also, I don't know if you can kind of tell, but the divisions in those pieces are like if you were a mouse down in the grasses. So those divisions are kind of come up, that's why those are kind of that kind of shape.
Your reds are really strong. How do you get that stronger red?
That's a copper red. So in reduction, hot firing and strong reduction and clean it up at the end. Yeah, but copper reds are a pain. They're hard to get a lot of times. So this is we'll kind of get into some of the public art projects now. How are we doing time wise? I don't know how long this is supposed to be.
We're good. Yep.
Okay.
It's 5 after 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So this was, you walk up to this one actually from behind. So it looks like a flower pot, that sort of tail part of it. And then when you get past it, you look back and you see that it's a squirrel, and he's probably about 4.5 feet tall, and then the plant in there. But that I did discovery, and it's in the children's garden part of Botanica. So I wanted people to turn around and kind of just and just kind of have a fun thing there. So I had a little chicken that lived in my studio, and her name was Mrs. Biggles, and so anyhow, Mr. Biggles kind of came from that name. And this is the project that's here in town. Phil F. and Terry Corbett worked with them on this project. And then I did the 2 figures they're 6 foot tall figures, and kind of Henry Moore, sort of benevolent presence there. So, and also those sort of benevolent presence figures were part of this project. So this is the Criminal Justice Center in Salina. So the court is there, and the sheriff's department, the jail, and people aren't there for very happy reasons for the most part. So my idea here was the fabric of society. So hence the title Woven. So this abstracted woven design is in this colored stamped concrete, in the tiles, on the bollards and the figures, and then some on the front of the building, and then inside the courtroom also. And then combined with these figures that are sort of just a welcoming or friendly presence there in front of the building. So maybe, letting people know they aren't all alone dealing with whatever they're dealing with.
Do you have those anchored down somehow?
I do. Yeah. So I have some all thread, some B7, which is a hardened all thread that threaded up into the pieces. When I got there, I lifted them, threaded that up in, and put anchoring concrete or anchoring epoxy, and then urethane adhesive, and lowered it down. So yeah, I was installing some pieces in Charlotte, North Carolina, and ran into an engineer that was giving me all kinds of trouble and about using this adhesive to stick a piece down. And I said, I'm not going to let you stick that down with bathtub caulk. And I had a piece that they had to move. It was glued down. It was 12 inches by 12 inches. And I did a full pad of that urethane adhesive. They had to move it, and they were going to just yank it off there. They brought in a 100-ton crane and maxed out the crane. They couldn't yank it off of there. So they wound up having to cut the whole post. They brought in a diamond embedded cable that they had to cut the whole post on. So I was like, bathtub cock, yeah, but it's not kind of loose. So yeah, and that's always, with ceramics, it's very strong, but it's brittle. So I always try and engineer in a little bit of movement in pieces. So whatever it is, I use some plates and die cutting springs sometimes, which are little springs, but it takes 400 or 600 pounds of compression to compress those. So they're very stiff. And when it all pulls together, it's got just a little bit of movement, so it can absorb some impact or wind or somebody pushing on it without cracking the piece. So you want to transfer that energy if you can. So yeah, so hopefully they all have a little bit of movement to them. There's a little closer view of the Salinas. And this is the project I did with Ray and Albert Martinez did the painting behind here. So I'll try, if I'm getting this wrong, Ray, tell me. But, Ray was the lead artist on this project, and the idea was to represent the different groups that have used this geographic area over the past several centuries. So the wall is a Native American design. They're the original inhabitants of that particular area. The drive has an early American quilt design on it, sort of represents the first settlers coming to the area. Now it's a heavily Hispanic area, and so brought in the Mayan stelas, and the Mayans were actually one of the first cultures that had libraries, so it's a good fit for that reason. And then also so those are about 12 feet tall, you can see, and put a book in its hands since it's a library, and tennis shoes, and again those are things that yeah, I don't know that people really notice, but you add in these little levels of interest if people spend a little bit more time around it. And that's, again, this, if you can have a passive interaction and walk by, it's like, oh, that's interesting, or just touch it a little bit, or spend a little more time kind of thinking about what it is or why it's there, or put it there, and what it represents. So anyhow, this is at the Dyck Arboretum. So there are 12 of these slabs that have quotes from different people about the prairie. In fact, we have one of our quoted people here tonight, Dwight. Dwight Platt has a quote on one of these slabs. And so it's this idea of a man-made object, the fence, kind of breaking down, going back to nature, and the hedge posts and stainless steel, so that the natural materials and sort of more man-made materials. And then these are stopping points around a walking trail. So you walk and then get to them, kind of read the quotes, and then move on to the next ones. And so, the grasses grow up, and sometimes they're partially obscured, which is really fine with me. I installed a project, just finished up, and I was out there, and I got there back to do some more installation. There was bird poop on one of them, and a bird sitting on there, and that was just really wonderful to have kind of blessed in that way. Yeah, that, in fact, when I was applying for that project, some of the questions were, well, what's going to happen when somebody builds a nest on it? And that's going to be great. Yeah, not the problem. So this stuff has to live around things and what's happening to it. So this is at the high school here in town. So the railroad history of the town, and the platform covers that are actually, some of them are saved next to the engine here. So these archways were kind of reminiscent of that. Originally, these were all connected together. So I've always loved airport hub maps. If you open up the back of your travel magazine, there are all these kind of bouncing arches that connect all the different hubs. And so that was kind of the idea, is that high school was a stop on life's journey, and represented by the tiles. So all those tiles were made by students that represented different clubs and this sports and academics and all the different things that sort of come together to make the high school community and experience, representing that stop, and then these connecting points representing your journey, and that sort of railroad history. And that was how it connected people on their journeys. This is the Nomar project. So I did the tiles that are part of this archway, and they're also in some of the fence areas up front, and then the finial pots up on top. So there were that top one is probably about 5 feet tall, And I had an assistant that summer, and we were up there, and the crane was bringing that thing in, and we were both up there on a lift, and the storm was moving in, and lightning was crashing around us, and rain, and she was I don't like heights, and she was just telling jokes and singing, and and she loved it up there. But anyhow, and Ray was Ray was involved in this project also. So the sun, it's an open air market, and so the sun was sort of representing that open air Del Sol, and then it's a squared off spiral, which is, I mean, I think we were trying not to do any religious.
It's more like the Mayan kind of motifs,
Right?
simple.
And it was just decorative. It didn't have any particular meaning other than just decorative. So that squared spiral, using those tiles, and I think they're talking about adding another structure, more to this. So we'll see what happens with that. But you can see there are finial plots. Is there a pointer on there? Well, anyhow, down at the corner of the building where it hits the concrete. And so I got a call one time. I was out in Philadelphia, but they got a call at the hotel, and they said, they put the footings in. They're 6 inches too high. They're going to be sticking out of the ground. And so we ended up making some more of those finial pots and cutting a quarter of it out, and then sticking them on those corners to cover up that mistake. There was a good construction manager on that project, and his saying that I've always remembered is, it's never a mistake until you can't fix it. As long as you can fix it, it's not a mistake. So that was, it was aesthetically, it became like really important to the thing, to give this structure a root, a connection to the ground, but it was fixing a mistake. These are at the library in Wichita. So there were bollards under these. There was a big steel column that goes down into the ground and filled with concrete, so nobody can drive a car through the front of the building. But then these I made these covers to fit over that, to just make it a little bit more interesting. And again, these are quotes from, well-known quotes from different texts. And so people have to walk around them and read them and touch them, and, spend time with them that way. If they're gonna read them. Stainless steel piece. So I did those mixers, and I had a lot of rolling equipment and all that. So when I stopped doing those, I still had all that equipment, and decided to do some stainless steel work. I do some sketches for the figurative pieces, and so these kind of came out of those sketches. The line drawings and sort of the movement that was trying to get into those. So that's about 12 feet tall. And again, with steel, it's a very different aesthetic, but I can work larger. It's actually much lighter weight than the clay, so easier to move around, and I can just sort of slide it in the back of my truck and slide it out and not worry too much about it. So they're interesting. We'll see where that ends up going. But this is the project in Wichita that I just installed. So it's at a wetlands park, Proc Wetlands Park, it's called. It's at 29th and Mays Road. So there's going to be a raised walkway that goes in a loop through this 40-acre park. And along that walkway, there are going to be 5 sort of stopping, sitting areas or contemplating areas. There's going to be artwork involved in each of those areas. So this is, I don't have a picture of it, but there's a Cortan steel. So Cortan is a steel that looks rusty. It develops an oxide on the outside of it, so it doesn't rust further than just that oxide. And then the walkway is a galvanized grate and a galvanized sides on it. So stuff can grow up through it. You can see down through it. Animals can get underneath it or swim under it or walk under it. So kind of looking at those colors, and then the colors that are around us every day, as the Nathan Esau was out there the other evening, sneaking around past the barricade. It's not open yet, but he got a picture of this facing the sunset, and that reflection on the water and the colors and the pieces. So this is the color you were talking about. The color of what is your theme? Is
Color Our World.
Color Our World is the theme. The title of this whole piece is, there are 15 of these pieces that are spaced around there, and the color of time, and so it's the time of day, the season, the sunlight, so all and everything that grows, and birds, the colors that birds, so all those things, and then the stainless steel sort of relating to galvanized steel, that gray, and then the rust colors in these pieces relating to that Corten steel. And then the triangle is a shape that develops. You can see there's a duck swimming through the water, so developing that triangle wake and how they overlap, and triangles of birds as they fly in. So picking up on that triangle, and then the horizontal ripples of the water, and there's the vertical of the grass in those triangles, and then that idea of this being a resting place. So birds come in, they rest, they spend time there, recover, and move on the rest of their journey. So that safety of being down in the weeds and sort of hiding there, that experience of going through this walkway and walking in between these pieces, sort of mimicking that experience of the birds.
Tell them about the water.
And the water, yeah.
Well, that it was dry when you put it in.
It was dry when I put it in, and I was rushing around. I finished Saturday. I think it started raining Sunday, maybe.
Yes.
But yeah, would have been impossible since then. But yeah, it's a protected wetlands area, so we had to go through a whole process of what kind of support structure this would be. So these are actually tip to bottom are about 25 feet long. So they screw. It's a helical plates on this pier, and they screw that down until you get to, I don't know, whatever pressure it is on the machine, and then they'll support 30,000 pounds each of those vertical columns. So we had to, because whatever you put in has to be removable. You can't put something in that's going to be permanent there because it's a wetlands area. So we had to screw these things about 14 feet down into the ground, and it is interesting, working with architects and engineers and sort of always figuring something different out.
So does that have to be cleared with the Corps of Engineers?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, we had to make a change, and it had to go back, and but that's all that went through them. Mm-hmm. And there it is. Yeah, the first one was, you can see a cloudy day and the colors, and then second one's a sunny day, and the colors are just a little brighter. And so I've been really happy with this and seeing it. It was all just dirt around there, and they seeded it, but with the water around, it's just been cool to see that in past 2 weeks. So this is a project that I'm just finishing up the firing on. So that project and some of the others are there are ideas there, and maybe you have to spend a little more time sort of understanding those. I try not to make things that need a 2 or 3 page or 5 page explanation to get anybody to understand them. I sort of feel like I've failed as an artist if that's the case. I want things that people can, if they spend a little time, can kind of understand what's going on. At least mostly, maybe there are some things that they miss, but anyhow, that one is kind of a little more like that, a little more cerebral. This one is just going to be kind of a fun one. It's a dog park, so dogs are just great. Lord Byron, I think, said that dogs possess all the positive attributes of human beings and none of the negative. So, it's going to be two of these dogs. They're going to be up on concrete pedestals and have tiles around the bottom, which are going to have dog prints. Diane's dog, who's no longer with us, we did some of his footprints in those tiles, and then, excuse me. Yeah, there will be two of these dogs. So one standing up in kind of begging position, and then the other one is going to be kind of down in the playing position. And then there will be three big ceramic balls kind of just gathered around on the ground. So I think and again, I thickened them up because I knew people were going to be climbing on these things and kind of be all over them. So I wanted to be strong enough to support themselves. And so that the other thing I'm going to do on these is an elastomeric roof coating. I'm going to spray the insides with them because when you break an egg, if you can really break it and it doesn't fall apart. So that's the idea, is that there's a membrane on the interior of this thing. If it does break, it's not going to fall over and squash somebody. Sort of, they're big enough to kind of have to think about those kinds of things, but anyhow, yeah. So this is just going in the kiln now, and be about 3 or 4 weeks, and be ready to start installing it. So that's what I've got. If there are questions,
So he'll go in the kiln standing up, or do you have one that's?
yeah, I have 2 different kilns. One's sort of more vertical, and one's more horizontal. So he'll actually go in 2 pieces. So behind, again, like I said, if I can hide a joint, I will do that, but I don't want, I try not to have arbitrary joints, but right behind the ear and the leg, and then there's going to be a stainless steel collar that'll cover up most of that joint. So that divides into 2 pieces. So right now he's like sawed in half, and the head is in the kiln. And then, the tongues. So I didn't make a ceramic tongue. Because that would be a little bit of a spot that might be fragile. So I'm making a stainless steel tongue. I'll paint it with an epoxy paint and a catalyzed urethane pink. So sometime I got to go to the paint store and pick out a tongue pink. I'm not sure what that's going to be.
So when you're composing a sculpture like this, do you make a smaller scale model first to work out your ideas?
Mm-hmm.
You can
Yeah.
see it in that picture.
Yeah, actually in the background there, just above the back haunch.
Oh, yeah.
You see it's a little, yeah. So I usually start with the drawing first, and then go to a smaller maquette. And especially on something like this, some of the ones that are, or the figurative things, I will sometimes just work right from a sketch and see what happens. But that can go off the rails sometimes. But luckily with clay, as long as you haven't fired it, you just kind of break it up and put it in water.
This is all slab built, right?
Yeah. So I'll kind of add clay and shape and keep the rim covered again. Just kind of work my way up. So with clay, it shrinks, so you can't put any internal structure in it, otherwise it pushes itself apart. So they're all kind of like eggshells, basically. They're hollow. I do put small ribs in sometimes just to provide a little extra support in certain areas, where the chin is farther out or things like that. But
So how did you get from kitchen backsplashes to this size?
yeah,
Yeah, and how did you get in contact with June on the other side of the world?
yeah. Well, so there are all kinds of ceramic programs all over, summer programs and that kind of stuff. So I did a number of summers at different places, and I had run into a number of people that I really appreciated their aesthetic and their approach to their life and their work. And it turned out they were all students of June's back then. So he was somebody I was very interested in working with. So I wound up being lucky enough to be in this temporary assistant of his in Colorado when he came out there to do a workshop. And then, he invited me to come to a studio and work. And so I quit my job and I rented my building and I was ready to go there. And he said, "Oh, you didn't come fast enough. I found somebody else." So, so then about a year later, he called again and was looking for somebody. So, he was a very interesting person for sure.
Sounds easy to know.
He's in Omaha. Yeah. But yeah, that, you learn different things from people. And sometimes you learn what you want your life to be like. You sometimes learn what you don't want your life to be like. And, everybody sort of has a different approach and
You
sort of,
always, you always
choose.
fire, gas.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's my glazes are formulated for reduction, firing, and cotan. And so, I kind of stick with that. Wood firing is interesting, but I don't have the patience to do that.
Are you planning on doing a book with photographs and narrative about all the work you've done?
Yeah, someday it would be nice. Yeah. I feel like I need to make some more stuff. I'm still, I manufactured those clay mixing machines and I installed for June and, did so many different things that I'm really just appreciating being in the studio full time right now. And I've got a lot of backed up stuff that I want to, keep getting out for a while yet. Yeah. Yeah.
That was my question. What is the mega piece that you're driven to create right now?
Well, yeah, that's good. These public art projects. So they put out calls for artists when there's money for a project. So, you're always looking for those and sort of some are too big and some are too small. And so you're kind of looking for the ones that look like they'd be interesting and possible to do without making you crazy. And applying for those. And then it's a little like fishing that, you put that worm on the hook and 99% of the time the worm swims away and you don't catch anything. So, once in a while something comes along. So I'm applying for those things, but I've got to, right now I'm once this project's finished up, I am applying for other stuff, but I kind of want some free time to just pursue what I want to do. It's very nice having larger projects that are longer term, a year and a half, 2 years, through all planning and everything. But it's kind of nice to just have some freedom too. Yeah. So we'll see. And always doing sketches and. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a lot of things going at the same time?
Yeah, I usually do, because it's not, if something takes 6 months or 9 months, it's not like every day, all day. There's a lot of sort of waiting time and sort of making sure you're not going too fast. And in between that, it's good to have a lot of different things going. That way you can spend time on this one and some time on that one. Mm-hmm.
Have you had things blow up in the kiln and you just go, "Oh no, I've spent 6 months on it"?
Knock on wood. I have. Yeah, for sure. I've dropped things and I've blown things up. Yeah. But you learn from those experiences and that's where I was talking about not using the computer to fire anymore and much more by feel and by gut. And that's something that's, is taken. I've been doing this for a lot of years. So kind of have, but it's always possible.
It's very scary.
It's very scary. Every time I have a little ceremony that I've picked up different things. So I do a ceremonial, I close the door of the kiln and I kiss the piece and I kiss the kiln and I do a ceremonial sweeping of the floor and I do a little pile of salt. So I use Himalayan salt and evaporated Hawaiian sea salt, mix of that. And I pour a circle of Russian vodka and a circle of a circle of sake and then take a drink of sake.
True story.
Yeah. So, I picked these things up over the years. And then, you also make a little ceramic kiln god. So and that sits on top, less than two. So, and that one just stays there. Yeah.
I just think that the durability of ceramic it really is extraordinary. And do you ever think about the fact that your art could be still around basically how it is now in thousands of years?
Well, I had, a couple of different things. I had a teacher that would smash pots sometimes. And he said, that is so ugly. I am not going to allow that to exist for eternity. And a friend of ours in Wichita, this is just even a couple of days ago, he said, when everything else is gone, it's going to be there are going to be cockroaches and some toilets and Conrad's pieces. Everything else will be gone. But yeah, that is, how you represent society and your times. And it's very interesting how that all changes. I mean, that's, as artists, it's amazing. And that's one of the risks of putting text on your pieces, because words change, language change very fast. And what that means could potentially be a problem in the not too distant future. I had a piece actually here. It's on the back of the Carriage Factory gallery, and the person that it's for, it's an open book, like our lives are an open book, and she was a painter. So there's a tube of paint with some paint squeezed out on a next to some paint brushes, and there was a young girl and standing there, and she said, "Look, Mom, it's the poop emoji." This was done 20 years ago when the poop emoji didn't exist. It was paint coming out of the tube. But so a good representation of that, how images and how language and all that changes. So yeah, I'm hopefully thinking about that when I'm making something, and how this, in 5 years or 10 years or 100 years, what this might represent or be. Right?
Yeah, and actually, when they approached me about the Nomar, they actually wanted murals painted on that, and I said, "Man, you do murals, in time they'll fade." And I said, "I do have somebody in mind that I think we could do ceramic tiles," and that's how that came about. Whereas the one at Evergreen, we did paint a mural, and it's already been painted once, because over time it deteriorates, and whereas the sculptures are still.
Yeah, the fired surfaces. Yeah, and that's, right now I have to, you have to provide them with a maintenance thing and everything. Mine is like, man, just leave alone. That's the maintenance you need to do with it. But yeah, the ceramics, the glazed ceramic surface, it's like for UV light and everything is stable, and like paint, spray paint or magic marker or whatever can be taken off of, like lacquer thinner or that kind of any kind of graffiti. Mm-hmm.
I have a question for the tech guy over here. Will this presentation be available online for viewing?
Yes, it's on Facebook right now, actually. So hello Facebook and Zoom. You can go to our Facebook page.
Those of us who do not do Facebook, will there be some way to access it?
Yes, so it'll be on the Facebook immediately afterward, and then I will download it and transfer it to the library's YouTube channel as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you collect?
Well, a lot of stuff that I think is going to be useful in the future, boards and pull bricks, pottery. My collection is mostly stuff I've traded for or has come from people I know. So teachers and that kind of thing. Yeah, but that's mostly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you ever gotten to completion with a piece and then the project fell through?
Yeah, I haven't, I mean, that does happen. You know, that's that with contracts and everything, that's kind of rare that happens. You know, but also when you sign that contract, you have to stand up to your end of it too and finish it no matter what, even if it ends up costing more than the budget is. But yeah, I mean, you have to be a little bit careful about that kind of stuff. And hopefully, you know, that it can go somewhere else if that happens. But yeah, I haven't run into that. I've had pretty good luck with public projects and the different projects I've worked on. So
I really appreciate your versatility. You have, for lack of better, goofy things like this, more whimsical. But then you've put so much thought into some of your other ones. Not that you didn't put thought into this, but your ones with the waves and the maybe the grasses and you.
yeah, and that's, you know, that's one of the things with art as a career, and I think, you know, that like if you go into business, your goal is to run a company and make money, and it's pretty defined, and your success is measurable. If you go into the art world, it's kind of not defined. I mean, it's scary, it's difficult, it's also exciting and fun, you know. So you kind of have to begin to define that, and probably at a fairly young age, define it. Who am I, and you know, figure that stuff out. Because yeah, if you want to be in the magazines and in galleries and you know all that, you have to sort of go a certain direction. I wasn't necessarily interested in that. I enjoy the freedom of being able to do all kinds of different things and whatever I want to do. That doesn't necessarily fit well with galleries, and they're sort of the way they market things. So
So do you still enjoy cooking?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You still make some of those amazing sauces, and do you do the cooking in your family, or does?
We both do, but he does the bulk of our main courses.
I've forgotten an awful lot. And we were at the old mill at the same time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so when the old mill closed, is that when you went back to school? Did you?
No, I already had the studio at that point.
So you just devoted more time than your.
Right. And so yeah, the old mill was still going. I was working there, and I left to go work for June.
Okay.
During that time, and yeah, it's, you know, I love cooking, and there's a lot that is the same about cooking and ceramics, and in fact, most ceramic people love to cook also. So it's a lot about the timing and
firing.
Yeah, there's heat involved and recipes and the timing of it all and the rhythm of it, and yeah, so it's a yeah.
And he can stick his hands in a really hot oven without any problem. That's true.
But yeah, that's yeah.
It's probably a dumb question, but despite your ceremony and the little kiln god, has anything ever gone wrong so that you weren't able to meet a deadline?
Yeah, artists are kind of famous for not meeting deadlines. But yeah, it's, you know, like this construction or the prop pieces that I shouldn't admit I was behind schedule, but the construction company was farther behind schedule. So it appeared as though I was on schedule. Yeah. But I try and be realistic about that and upfront, you know, right away. I say, you know, the clay isn't something you can rush, and it'll be done when it's done. I will certainly shoot for this time schedule, but I'm not going to guarantee it can't. You know, I'd rather have it turn out well. And like you were talking about, it's you know, it's going to be there for a long time. So, you know, a couple weeks or a couple months is worth waiting.
Well, thank you, and let's give Conrad a round of applause.